you need to understand what technical debt is and what it's for. Because the problem I see is saying that technical debt is always bad and not understanding why technical debt is created. Can be in different reasons, but assuming that we create technical debt because we are all bad and we cannot solve it is wrong. Because, for example, look at the tools you have on the shelf. You may have a hammer there. Hammer has some purpose, but if you give that to a 5-year-old, then you have a big problem because everything is going to become a nail.
Welcome to the Product Agility Podcast, the missing link between Agile and product. The purpose of this podcast is to share practical tips, strategies, and stories from world-class thought leaders and practitioners. Why, I hear you ask? Well, I want to increase your knowledge and your motivation to experiment so that together we can create ever more successful products. My name is Maynard, and I'm your host. What has driven me for the last decade to bridge the gap between agility and product is a deep-rooted belief that people and products evolving together can achieve mutual excellence.
And in this episode, we welcome back David Pereira. Now, David, not only does he have a wealth of experience helping to build companies to huge sizes, he's also got a massive social media following. Why, you may ask? Well, because he's pretty bloody good at what he does. Now, in this conversation, the second of two, we explore in particular technical debt. We look at the eating habits of my son, and when is it ever right to bite off more than you can chew? So please enjoy this episode. Make sure you recommend it to someone that you know. It just takes each of you to recommend it to one person, and our listeners will skyrocket and we'll get the best people on the show. Anyway, that's enough. Enjoy the episode.
Here we are again. Second episode with David Pereira, which I maybe did a worse job at it that time. I'm sorry, David. I'm really trying today. It's been a long weekend. Here with David, and we've been talking about things relating to jobs last time and how sometimes the job we're hard to do isn't the job we are able to do in an organisation. That was episode 1. And during episode 1, first of all, David gave an introduction to himself, so I'd recommend listening to episode 1 or checking out the show notes because time is of the essence. And I don't think we should bother doing introductions again this time around. Second point, during the first conversation, we touched upon a very sensitive topic, technical debt. And I wondered perhaps then we could have a conversation around the future of debt, perhaps not just technical, but other forms of debt too. And so I would like to start this conversation by saying, David, I think that the war on technical debt has been lost and that people need to accept this and move on. What are your thoughts on that, David?
It's a very strong thought. And I can agree to you because you need to understand what technical debt is and what it's for. Because the problem I see is saying that technical debt is always bad and not understanding why technical debt is created. Can be in different reasons. But assuming that we create technical debt because we are all bad and we cannot solve it is wrong. Because, for example, if you look at the tools you have on the shelf, you may have a hammer there. Hammer has some purpose, but depending on if you give that to a 5-year-old, then you have a big problem because everything is going to become a nail. Then you have everything broken on your house. That's not what you want. And I say that technical debt is a tool that can help you if you know how to use it. But now it happened a kind of a war, and then there's the product manager trying to turn a blind eye to that and trying to block software engineers getting pissed with that, and then other kind of debt. But we can turn this around.
Technical debt, when it was first conceived, I believe, was a conscious decision. And I think describing it as a tool when it is a conscious decision is a really interesting take on it. I think perhaps what a lot of the issue is that organizations find is that actually technical debt was never a conscious decision. It was just part of their learning and part of their evolution as an organization, but they did things in a less skillful way than perhaps they would have liked to have done. But it wasn't a conscious choice. It was an unconscious thing based upon where they were at a point in time. So I love the idea of using technical debt as a conscious decision to, let's say, cut a corner to test something. But I want to draw a distinction between that and maybe people just kind of learning as they go and then ending up with software which perhaps they would have never have chosen to have designed or implemented in that way.
That's quite interesting because, yeah, people create technical debt in different ways. One can be the lack of skills that will create technical debt. But how you deal with that is the most important aspect. Because one of the common approach, which for me is the most disrespectful to the matter, I would say, is let's invest 20% of our time dealing with technical debt. This is saying like whatever fits 20%, which we all know we are bad at estimating. Then whatever fits 20%, we deal with that. I would say if this is very important, let's say our legacy is bad and this is getting in the way of scaling, for example, or getting in the way of reaching our next objective, let's step back, focus, and change it for the better right now. Let's focus on it. Because what I dislike is this thing of, it's just the ugly duck. No one wants to touch it. And we touch it when we can. And this when we can is a problem.
I mean, that kind of like giving the 20% time, then I don't know, a lot of the time it's not going to magically make people more skillful. Or and it's never gonna trump getting stuff done, right? When someone's believing doing that, you just have to get it done. And actually, even back to the last conversation we had, you were talking about maybe not explicitly about this, but mentioning around our confidence in a product decision, our confidence in something that we want to create, and that actually one of the best ways to increase our confidence is to get it in the hands of the users or customers to let us know whether or not it's going to work, or to get it to a specific segment to test whether it's going to work. And actually, gut feel is something we should have the lowest confidence in. Actually, having it in the user's hands is something we should have the higher confidence in. And so then what we're saying here is that actually that even though we may be cutting a corner to get it to the customer's hands to increase our confidence, if you were going to do that, would there be any other corners that you would cut other than from a technical implementation perspective? I'm thinking UX or anything else.
Yes, I think we would have to cut some corners. Because let's say in the beginning of any idea, it is an idea. You don't know whether that's going to work. And the challenge is, statistically, 9 out of 10 ideas will fail. And the question is, how fast do you drop the bad ones? And then learning is of essence, the speed you can learn. And for me, is the following. Start experiment small. Small is interview, something that takes minutes, not even hours. Do something that to learn and check the direction. And then you go to something that will take a couple of hours, like a small prototype. Then you increase that. And then it will come to the moment you want to get to the hands of user. But you don't want that to be perfect, because it will take a while. And you say, what is the fastest way to test some of the assumptions? And that is the magic. You need to know what you're testing. Because if you say, I'm testing everything, then you are not testing anything. So you need to know exactly. And then you build let's say, the fastest hack you can create. That includes usability that, design that, technical that, to test your assumption. And I say test because it's not validation. I don't want people to fall into confirmation bias. I want them to learn if it stands true or not. And then you test it. And then after that, you can make a better informed decision, saying, well, actually, the assumption was right. Here's the evidence. Then you say, what if now we test the other assumptions we had? Or maybe you say, now we are ready to build it right. Then you say, time to pay the debt off. And that is the moment bad decisions are generally made. One of the examples would be, oh, this solution is good enough, it's a little bit ugly and so on, but people can get the job done. Let's just scale this to 100% of our audience instead of 2%. And then it's for sure, software engineers, UX designers, everyone will go mad because they will say, that's not what I want.
And this is then where a lot of the problem comes from, is that you get something out there, you test it, it seems like a good idea from what you can tell. It increases your confidence in which to proceed. But unless there is, and who knows, maybe somebody thinks, do you know what, we can get it out there and the world won't stop spinning on its axis. And, it won't start raining frogs or anything. That actually, do you know what, there's some of these little things, getting them out there and trying to scale them up could be interesting. Maybe sometimes it'll work. But generally speaking, once you've proven something and you need to scale it, there's going to be work that needs to be done. And perhaps some of the mentality is saying that actually then that's part of how we work. We test it. If it's valuable, if we have confidence, then the next stage is to then do it properly. And we get more money to then carry on once we know it's a good idea. But then it's that expectation, isn't it? It's not having people who have made promises on deadlines and they said, well, we're going to have a pilot out, having some kind of prototype out, and then that's the promise and it's done, and they think you can move on to the next thing. When actually, no, there is a lag time, there's a lead time to actually making that thing that you've tested worthwhile. And this is what I was talking to a client about this morning, was this idea of promise cycles. And that if you want to make a real significant change in an organization, and you're looking at the promises that your senior leadership are making, but you need to wait for a cycle or two of promises to finish before they can start making new promises which are better aligned to the way that you want to work. So in that instance, it would be a case of not promising that it's done when the prototype is out and we have confidence. It's promising that, that we're going to run this experiment, we're going to learn, and at that point, then we're going to see if we release more funds, make more funds available to then make it into something which can scale and can see a larger return on investment.
Yes. It is like buying a house, right? You get a mortgage. So it's a shortcut to get access to the full value of it. So you get a house, but you have a mortgage. And what if you want to get another house? If nothing changes, you have to pay the debt off, or you get a second house, and then you go bankrupt because most probably you cannot pay both houses together. That's what happens with product. I like saying, if we don't pay the debt timely, we go bankrupt, because then that will scale to a way that no one wants to work in the product any longer, that we cannot plug new things there fast enough. And then it gets complicated because we decided not to pay our mortgage.
If there was a video on YouTube of Ward Cunningham, I think it was Ward that came up with the idea of technical debt. And I say Ward like he's a friend. Never met the guy. Mr. Cunningham. There's a video of Mr. Ward Cunningham on the internet, on YouTube, talking about technical debt. He says exactly that. It is a conscious decision to get into debt because we need something we can't quite afford right now, but we need it for whatever reason to test or because of a promise, whatever it might be. And then at some point, when we go into debt, we know that we have to pay it back. Otherwise, we'll go bankrupt. And I think then that's the issue here, isn't it? It's people aren't treating it like debt. So my saying the war on technical debt is dead, I think that in many respects it is. But I think that the future of debt then is perhaps a healthier relationship with it, seeing it as a necessity rather than the root of all evil, and drawing a clear distinction between unskillful or, I'll say unskillful software development versus making that conscious decision.
Yeah, it's a conscious decision on how we use it and how we pay it. Because what is detrimental to digital product development is a lack of focus, because this will increase context switching, and we all know what happens when it increases that. We become less productive, and also our quality decreases, and everything starts going in the suboptimal way, which no one wants, but that becomes a byproduct. So I miss more alignment into teams, because also there's a fear. For example, many product managers try introducing this. But then they will face developers unwelcoming that. The reason is simple. Developers had bad experience with this and they are resistant. I had this situation when I first came very excited about accelerating technical debt to speed up learning. Software engineer said, "No way, I'm gonna go that. I'm gonna go that way." Simple, because we built high quality code, and I said, "I understand you do that, but why would you build high quality code for something we are uncertain?" Then the software engineer, a team lead, even said, "Because I want to use that as a moment to learn, and then our team members will have the chance of learning how to do it correctly from the beginning." I said, "But this will get in the way of business because it's too slow and we will create a lot of waste before we create value." Then the software engineer, together with the team lead, all of them looked at me and said, "Yeah, you come with this beautiful speech, but the moment we have to pay it off, you run away, you push another feature, you want something else."
I find that so funny. But then this is where it's everyone, isn't it? It's that it's the behavior changes, and it's being able to make the right promises and being able to own the consequences and have the hard conversations with people. And before we started recording, I spoke about this idea of emotional debt, which now that I go think on it a little bit more, and for those of you that obviously had no idea what I'm talking about when I mention emotional debt, I'm talking about as I describe it, the invisible rucksack of all the different wounds and experiences that we collect in our journey through life and through organizations. And often when we turn up to a heated conversation, to a high stakes conversation, that we arrive and people can see our invisible backpacks and they kind of guess how we're going to behave and what we're going to bring up. But whilst I still stand by that as a metaphor, I wouldn't say that's emotional debt, because I don't think that, well, if I drew that as an analogy, that's more like the unskillful work building up because we didn't know we were unskillful, right? That's like coming down off a Mount Stupid and being like, "Wow, okay." A very old friend of mine who, like all good astrophysicists, is now a programmer. When I was talking to him, he said, "The software that I wrote 2 years ago, I look back at that and I'm just dumbfounded why I wrote it like that. It just makes no sense. I've learned so much." And that wasn't kind of conscious complexity. It's accidental complexity that I added into the system, which I think is what Fred Brooks drew from Aristotle in relation to complexity in code bases. So I think that emotional backpack is more like the accidental complexity we build up through going things. It isn't like we consciously decide to cut corners and be a dick. That kind of sticks to it, which is what we're saying with technical debt.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Yeah, when you said about code written 2 years ago, it's been some time. I don't write any code already, more than a decade, I guess. But I write a lot of blog posts. And sometimes I dare looking at the blog posts I wrote 1 year ago, and I look at that and say, "Oh my God, that's so embarrassing." But that was the best I could do back then. And I look at now, I say that means evolution. I guess I became a bit better at least. So I recognize what happened. But I don't go to my old posts and I start refactoring everything just for the sake of refactoring. That's not what I'm about to do. But when it comes to the emotional debt, I think if we don't address this with teams, we cannot function. Because imagine there are open conflicts there, but they're just not on the table. And there are some frustrations that people are just not naming them. And until they talk about these things, there will be frictions. And this is not going to be helpful. Although I am from the product side, I am a big fan of retrospectives. And I like moderating them sometimes just to get people to speak up, and then we take action. One of the things I like doing is having a retrospective, like looking at our previous action, what made you happy, sad, and mad. Just talk about it, and then we get to know and take action upon it. I also like looking at the collaboration. I say, in terms of collaboration, who you are happy with, who you are not okayish, and who are you angry with during the last sprint. And let's talk about it. So I create this room, and I generally try giving the example. I open the room, I give positive feedback to the others. I say what I didn't like. And sometimes I even give negative feedback to me because I say I was not happy with me with this thing here. Then the others start doing. And if they see it's a room that is safe to say that, they start saying more. And then the team becomes a better team.
It's hard for people to speak up, though. It's hard to create those spaces at times. It really is. And I wonder if, sometimes refactoring our teamwork or refactoring our emotions, or even refactoring a code base, right, to remove some of the conscious or accidental debt which we have accumulated over time. The one thing that I don't often see people maybe putting enough thought into is then the frequency at which that area of debt will affect us. If I have an emotional trigger over people wearing purple and yellow on a Tuesday between the hours of 1 and 4, then maybe not worth kind of spending time refactoring that, because it's going to happen so infrequently that people can probably put up with me when it happens. If we have a part of the system which has got the UX isn't great, but as a proportion of our users, it's like 1-2% of our users, and we've got other things actually which are higher priority, then why do bother refactoring the thing which is, isn't optimal for a very low percentage of our users? We wouldn't bother. We would prioritize something which has a higher touch rate. In the same way of code bases, and you mentioned this earlier as well to me. Why refactor a piece of the code because it is a little bit out of date and we need it to look better, or take on board some new approaches, or it needs to be more elegant, better wrapped in tests, if no one ever changes it, or it gets very rarely changed? So maybe is the future of debt a healthier understanding that the frequency at which we need to touch the thing which has the debt should drive our conversations around how best to resolve it, to pay it back?
Yeah, I think that the conversation is the key of everything. Because what matters in the end is the collaboration with people. Sometimes go to this philosophical thing. For example, some software engineers tend to defend the technical debt with the car analysis, saying software is like a car. You need to replace oil, you need to change tires, you need to change the brakes, otherwise the car is going to break. I say, well, I disagree just a bit with that, because a car is mechanical. So there's a spare part and it has a lifetime. Software is a set of complex things. And if the environment doesn't change, the software will still work. You just look at the bank. Some things were created like 3-4 decades ago and they still work. It's a bit crazy, but still work. And what I say is, if something changes, we have to look there and then talk about it. For example, are we scaling to a level the current structure doesn't support? Let's talk about it. Are we adding different rules or complexity? The example I gave was the invoice. A software engineer told me we have to refactor the invoice system. And for that, I need at least 2 months because it's a massive code. I said, okay, I'm in this company for 1.5 years, and there was no single need of changing the invoice system. You are here for 4 years. When was the last change request? And then he looked at me, never, but the code is a spaghetti code and I hate it. And it needs to be a clean code. He opened the code and showed me, there are methods here with 150 lines. And according to clean code, should be 5 lines. I said, okay, but let me ask you the tricky question. What would happen if we don't do anything that you say? Then he stayed quiet for a while. He looked at me. Well, another developer would not like to work on this code, as I wouldn't like either. I said, but if the code hasn't changed over the last 4 years, it means you haven't worked on the code anyway. And then he looked at me, yeah, you're right. I haven't. I just don't like it. Said, refactor for the sake of refactoring is not a good excuse. It's not, I said, I cannot sell that to anyone. How can I say that we are using a highly qualified professional for a long time to refactor something that has no change and makes no improvement? I said, well, all right. Then I said, let's make an agreement between you and me. The moment I come with a brilliant idea to change the invoice system, I put that on the package. You refactor everything. He said, fair enough. That's a good point. Yeah, the code was never refactored. I left the company after some point in time, and I still talk to people who are there, and nobody touched that because the invoice system in Germany didn't change.
But I mean, you can't knock people's passion, right, to fix something like that. I mean, you must have those situations in your life where you look at the thing, you're like, I know this isn't a good way of spending my time, but oh God, I really want to fix it. Or I really want to make that a little bit better. You know, that's a great quality to have. Granted, maybe we need to direct it a little bit, but that's a wonderful quality to have in people you work with, that passion to want to make stuff better.
That's a great point. It's being proactive. I like that. But then, as you said, you need to direct, because I could deal if the person would tell me, I need to refactor this and it's going to take 2 to 3 days. I would say, go for it. But the person told me it would take 1 to 2 months. And I know when we are estimating somewhere between 1 to 2, it means we have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that I couldn't defend. So I said, I appreciate, but how can we move on? And for other occasions, this person didn't ask for permission, because then I said, inside the sprint, we have a goal. And once we reach the goal, I don't care what you do. So we have a commitment on the goal. We agree on that. So within the rest of time you have, if you want to refactor code, pay off technical debt, fix bugs, or try out something, just do it. Go for it. But if you are going to sell something that it consumes considerable time, we need to talk more.
Mm. It's a funny old game, isn't it? And it's because I say that because, you know, I think me and you, maybe we had a chat about this before, but and maybe let's see if we can relate this to the idea of debt as well. Because this is one of my favorite topics, like team level product ownership, or product owners that are really involved in all the detail. The example you provided then is that you gathered, collected a certain amount of respect from this person who's on the team because you didn't get involved in the detail particularly. You just strove to set the right direction and offered something which was a compromise but still played to your strength as someone setting direction and their strength as someone who was creating the software, creating the product. Now, I think that my guess is, and I say it's a guess because I haven't really put any thought into it other than now, but if you are a lower level product owner, you are involved at a team level and involved in all the refinement. If someone comes to you with a problem like that, saying, this is very hard to work with, I could never work with this, if I touch it, I break it, and it's a nightmare, then if you're involved in the nitty-gritty detail, would you be more inclined to maybe have those conversations and entertain the idea that work should be done?
It's quite interesting. I've entertained this idea already. So this was after some experience. Once in Brazil, I had a similar situation. Person wanted to refactor another part of the code and was so excited about it. And I had just moved into product management. I bought the idea. And the 3 weeks soon turned out to be 2 months. And then I had some trouble. So we had to have a conversation. Like I said, we had a deal. You told me you wanted to refactor. I appreciated that. So we made it possible. I could sell the prioritization, it would make the product higher quality. But you told me 3 weeks, and now it's taking 2 months, and I'm having a problem. So I always say the problem belongs to all of us. We are in it together. But if you tell me 3 weeks, I don't expect 2 months because that is complicated. Then we had a talk, and we said, what about next time we're going to go for a refactor? We do that in a more digestible size. So let's start small and see how it goes. So my learning back then was you need to have a cake that you can chew. So not put everything in your mouth that you cannot chew.
I've just got mental images. My boy Adam, my youngest boy, and one day he'll listen to this and be like, "Dad, you're such an arsehole." Like honestly, I make pancakes every weekend, and this boy, he will sit down, and I should really bring him up. I'm only mentioning this because I said my wife doesn't listen to these, because if she knew that I just gonna let this happen, then she would be annoyed. But he'll sit down with the pancake, and this is a good one if you're watching this on YouTube, and he sits at the pancake and pushes it all in to the point where he can't speak. I'm like, yeah, that's why you need to break things down to bite-sized pieces. Right. That's why refinement of your pancake is important. And if you cut your pancake into smaller pieces, and then you could have a choice of toppings on each piece of the pancake if you wanted to, Adam. You don't have to shove it all in your mouth all at once. So, with my lovely son Adam in my mind, and him with his cheeks full of pancake, is there such... Oh, I was going to say, is there such a thing? I'm going to chuck out a little hypothesis. I'd love to hear your opinion, David. Technical debt builds up slowly over time and then bites us in the arse after a certain amount of elapsed time. And that the gradual contribution to the tech debt, either consciously or unconsciously, is done by a wide array of actors over time. And then it gets to a certain point where it bites us and we're like, oh, perhaps we should fix this. So there's a big delay in cause and effect. Refinement debt. So not refining something properly, not understanding the user problem properly, like not being able, like that type of debt, refinement debt, I propose as a much shorter cycle time before you feel the effect, and thus is easier to fix. What do you say?
Well, the shorter the cycle time, the easier to fix this become.
The shorter the cycle time between cause and effect.
Yes, exactly. Because the biggest problem of technical debt I see is very simple. We don't have a strategy to deal with that. So it's as you said, it's something that we create and then it will bite us, and we have to deal with that. But if we, instead of putting a band-aid on the problem and say, yeah, let's invest 20% of our time to fix that, we say, no, we have a strategy. When we create mindfully how we fix it, or how we drop the whole functionality at all together with the technical that created. So I think it is about reducing the cycle time and also having a strategy, because it is very connected to what we talked the last time. Solution orientation. 2 days investment per sprint is a solution. Is it a good one or not? You need to know which problem you're trying to solve. So what is the strategy to solve the technical debt? And how do you diminish that? For example, if you are creating technical debt because of a poor software quality, what about leveling up your software engineers? It goes to usability and the other. So the same. Then when it comes to refinement, what happens in a refinement session? Are we talking purely about solutions, or are we talking about the problems we want to solve? That's a different set of things, because then you will eventually understand how you solve the problem and how you use the technical debt in your favor.
In your experience, from your years of being a senior product person, if you had to give some tips to other product professionals, aspiring product professionals, or people that support them in how then to deal with this? You mentioned strategies, and we've spoken about a number of different things. It's been brilliant. I'm really enjoyed going through this. I feel like we could keep going for a little bit longer. So I'm not saying we wrap this up, but I'm wondering if you had to give some tips, some top tips into how we can deal with this debt in a strategic way as product people, David, what would you suggest?
I'd suggest knowing what is the goal you are pursuing and then finding the best alternative for that. So if the goal is learning, I would say that building right from the beginning, it's a slow alternative. It will take a while to learn. But if your goal is to scale building wrong in the beginning, that will ensure you don't scale at all. So you need to understand what is your ultimate goal, and then you find a way of getting there as fast as possible.
So you presented two extremes there, I suppose, like two different sides of the coin. Is it fair to say that for most it's somewhere it's being able to adapt, but it's somewhere in between those things?
Yeah, for most, I would say it's the idea testing. So is this idea going to create the desired outcome? That's the very first thing, most of the case. I would even dare saying this is 70 to 8%. And what tends to happen is we go wild. We build the solution correctly from the beginning, scale to 100% of the audience and say, that's it. And then we realize nobody used and we don't know why. But then we are not brave enough to remove that from the product. And the other extreme is when we started small with idea and we started growing our audience. Let's say we built a product that is scalable for up to 10,000 users, and then we realize we're going faster, and now we need 100,000 users. So that is a different side of the coin. And if you're building for 100,000, a solution for 1,000 is not going to work. So you need to change it. But I think the most important part is knowing the goal. Learning the goal, then technical debt is a good tool for that. It can help you get to your goal of learning faster. But if your goal is scaling to more users, then creating more technical debt tends to be a bad choice.
If only it was that simple for people, right? Because I'm guessing that then what we end up in is a situation. And I know that I've been there as a product owner. I've been there as someone who's working on a product at the moment. Me and my partner have many conversations about is this a corner we should cut, or is this just part of our process of learning? And actually, this may feel like a wasteful thing to do, and we may end up having to redo this, but it's part of us figuring out how this user journey should work, or how it should feel for people when they're using the product. And these are conversations which we will always have to find compromises for. I'm wondering, have you ever found yourself in those situations where you're having to talk to more senior people in an organization, or talk to somebody that holds the budget, or something similar, where you're saying, it's going to be hard because we have this debt to pay back, or we're not going to, we're going to do this, which result in us learning, and then we're going to have to pay the debt back. Have you found yourself in those crucial compromise conversations at any point?
Yeah, several times. And I generally get myself there with the conversation of how much does it cost to do this? And I say, I have another question to you. How much budget do you have to invest into this? Because I say, then we can have a better conversation. So because this can cost as much as you imagine. It depends how far we go into this. And I say, if you give us the limitation, let's say that the available budget would cover a month of work. Then what we have to do internally is say, like, we have a month of work to get this idea to 100% of our users. Working backward, what we need to do to enable that possible. Then we can figure out there's some technical debt and so on and blah, blah, blah. Then we come to the situation that is not doable in 1 month. Then I will just go back and say, most probably to a month, we won't get to the expected result, because there's some technical debt on the way that will make it more complicated. We will need more time. And I say, Challenge is technical debt solving from legacy is unpredictable. We may think we get it solved in 1 week, but might get in the way and might take 2 weeks or 3 weeks. For example, of course, I would name that. I generally try picturing, saying it's like a box, you can only fit certain amount of things. And if you put more, the box will collapse. So we need to make the box stronger. And some senior managers would say, I don't care, make it possible. I would say, no, I cannot lie to you. I may say we can make it possible, but I would be lying. So I try having an honest conversation. Say, I'm just doing my best to show you what can be achieved and what cannot. And you decide if you want to make a bet or not. It can be that you invest this amount of budget and we won't get anything done, but we will get a lot of learning and we can share the learnings, and you decide if you want to invest more. That's what the budget can get. This better information to decide whether to invest more or not. Sometimes we may say, which is very unlikely, but the budget is way too big for what you want to achieve. That doesn't happen.
If only. Oh, honestly, if you'd have so much money left over. You'd have so much money left over if you do this. Never have I had that conversation. I do remember the conversation where we had a budget of 13 million to deliver a replacement platform. And they said they wanted it for 100% of the customers it was like within a year or 18 months or 15 months, I think it was in the end. And we spent a lot of time, like a week. We had a great team, we had some great people, and we were able to get enough of the right experts and senior people involved and really tried to understand, okay, what do we think is possible then in the time frame that we have? And what was possible was about 1% of the users. And that did not go down well. And then they decided, well, in that case, let's speed it up. Let's give you some more people. So we pushed back and ended up giving us like 2 or 3 more teams. And it was a shit show. It ended up costing, I think, nearly 50 million in the end. And was just horrific. And what was interesting was I remember I got asked to join another part of the organization because they were like, look, this is, your skills are wasted here. It's going a certain direction and you can't change that now. But I stayed really close to the people involved in it. And it did get to that point where one of the senior technology managers was asking the team, how do you speed up? Like, let me come and sit with you and watch what you're doing so I can figure out where you can save some time. And then watch them doing like acceptance test driven development. So, putting acceptance tests into a testing framework, making sure they failed, and then coding enough until the acceptance test passed in a test framework. So that's a waste of time. Stop doing that. Just stop doing that. It's fine. We'll fix all that in UAT. So when they say stop doing it, they got to UAT and it went horribly wrong. He's like, we need to fix this. What can we do? Like, well, automated testing. He's like, well, I want you to go back and write all the automated tests, acceptance tests for all the stuff you've done since. And we're like, that isn't going to work. And it was just a very, very sad story of a situation where there wasn't a sensible conversation to be had about what was achievable in a time frame, which just led to huge amounts of technical debt being built up, and then a wish at the end that it wasn't that way, which of course didn't help anybody.
It's about having the honest conversation, right? You need to say what is realistic and what is not, then can decide how to go. But there is this thing of we increase the size of the development team and we expect to get more output. Well, there is this sentence everyone knows: 9 women cannot make a baby in 1 month, and the same applies to software engineering. Actually, if you put more people, it will slow down in the beginning.
Yeah.
It will take a while. And the more complex the situation is, the domain, the longer it takes to ramp up people. And for every new software engineer, you need another to help the person ramp up.
I think that relative speed, so relative to what you could achieve, it is always faster if there's high alignment on what you're doing and why you're doing it. And when you add more people to the pool of people, you dilute that alignment and that shared understanding of why you're doing it and how you wish to do it, as well as then you have different levels of capability inserted into the system. It's always going to be an incredibly hard challenge to be anything but slower if you're going to dump a load more people into something. And it's going to be very hard then to end up with either some level of accidental technical debt or a huge amount of philosophical debate as to which type of principles we should be following, or is this even the right technology to be using? And in that, again, just takes time and facilitation for people to actually then align and create that new shared understanding. Now, David, we are kind of getting towards the end of our time, sadly. And yeah, how I would love to have done this in person. I feel that it's been a great conversation, and we've hit upon some really good points, and there's so much more I feel we could go into. But I wanted to loop back round to the beginning of this episode with what I stand by, which is the war on technical debt is dead. I think we need to stop seeing this as a battle, because there's always going to be some level of intentional or accidental technical debt. So if we were going to change the narrative, change the story on this, David, what do you think could be a suitable alternative term for technical debt?
Everyone is on the same boat, so we need to talk about it and stop the conversation like us versus them. I see a lot of software engineers versus product managers versus UX designers. No, we have to get a job done. How can we best use our skills to get it done? And let's not stick to our guns all the time and open up. So product managers will make mistakes, and create an atmosphere where feedback is welcome. Show vulnerabilities. I think software engineers, I love when they tell me, hey Dave, you did something bad there, you promised, and now you didn't stick to that. Then we talk about it and we solve it. So instead of saying like, yeah, technical debt is bad, we don't do this and so on. No, we're on the same boat. We want to get there. How do we get there? Together. Maybe that's good. So let's have a conversation instead of being dogmatic.
And then maybe we don't call it technical debt. Maybe it's just the technical journey. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I can't
That's a
think
good
of
point.
any product, any product client or work I've been involved with directly, which has never resulted in any form of debt. It just seems to be the journey that we go on, accidental, intentional, or otherwise. That's just a journey.
It's just a journey. It's just a journey. That's it. I can only agree to that. I have seen some teams panicking with bugs. It's very similar to the technical discussion, saying we have to fix. There's a bug. I say, wait. There are different types of bugs. You need to. Software has bugs. That's it. So is it first getting in the way of delivering on the value proposition? No. Okay. How many customers are being impacted? Only the ones using maybe Kindle. So, okay. So that might be 0.01% of people who decided to browser on Kindle. So maybe we just don't care about it. It's fine to say that.
I think it was, and I don't know how true this is, but I heard it was Martin Fowler when they were writing the Agile Manifesto. When asked about documentation, said that we should document anything where the need is immediate and significant. And I think the same is true for bugs. If the need for fixing it is immediate and significant, then let's do it. If not, then it should get relatively ordered against the other work we have to do.
Yeah, that's so true.
On that note, David, I wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming along and having these conversations with me. It's been a pleasure to get to know you a little bit better. And I really hope that we can do this in person one day, because I've got a funny feeling we could have a bit of fun.
It was a pleasure. I enjoyed a lot.
Good.
Thank you.
I will put links to various things in the show notes. Is there anything in particular, though, you wanted to share with the listeners as to where they can find out more information about you?
Well, you can find everything about me on my website. It's d-pereira.com. So say there you'll find everything. And if you want to get weekly insights, just subscribe for my newsletter, Untrapping Product Teams, on Substack for free. And then you get my insights there, straight to your inbox.
Well, I will absolutely put those links into the show notes. And I will thank you again, once again, David. It's been awesome to have you on board. I thank everybody for listening. And we'll be back again next week, which is generally how things work. So we look forward to speaking to you then. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for staying to the end. It's always a treat to have you here with me. Now, the conversations with David were enlightening, and what's going to be coming up next week? Well, that's going to be a surprise. We have a huge backlog of brilliant guests and some even more brilliant guests in the pipe. So, what will I choose to edit? I'm not sure. If you have any requests, then please do get on social media, tag us and ask the guest that you would like, or a question, or perhaps something to pose to some people, or a particular topic. Really, fill the box. So please reach out to us on social media. Drop me a line, Ben Maynard. Let me know what you'd like to hear, or who you'd like to hear from. And once again, thank you for listening. This is the Product Agility Podcast.